As I sit here on a set that's mine and a TV show and everything else I got, it's because Ilosville Harvey taught me about the love of God and the respect of people.
He makes millions of people laugh every single day. But there was a time when this man cried himself to sleep every single night inside a freezing car with nothing but a bologna sandwich and a prayer. He washed his body in gas station bathrooms. He stole fuel just to make it to the next town. And the world had absolutely no idea he even existed. Before the tailored suits and the billion-dollar empire, Steve Harvey was a ghost on the American highway. And his real story is far more painful than anything you have ever heard. The price of the crown. Let us start with the moment that almost ended everything. December 20th, 2015, Las Vegas, Nevada. Nearly 500 million people are watching from living rooms across the globe. Steve Harvey is standing on the biggest stage of his life, hosting the Miss Universe pageant. This was supposed to be his victory lap. He had conquered comedy, he had conquered radio, he had conquered daytime television, and now here he was, the master of ceremonies for the most glamorous night in the world. The evening had gone perfectly. Steve was charming. He was funny. He was in total command. Then came the final moment. Two women stood before him, Miss Colombia, Ariadna Gutierrez, and Miss Philippines, Pia Wurtzbach. Steve held a small white card in his hand. He looked at it, he looked at the camera, and he said the words that would ring in his ears for the rest of his life. And the new Miss Universe is Miss Colombia. The crown was placed on her head. Confetti flew. The audience erupted. For 4.5 beautiful minutes, Miss Colombia was the queen of the universe. And then a producer screamed into Steve's earpiece, "You read the wrong name. You read the wrong name." Steve Harvey had two choices. He could let the show end and fix it backstage. It would have saved his dignity. It would have saved him from public execution. But Steve Harvey, the son of a coal miner, the man who learned integrity in the hard streets of Cleveland, Ohio, knew that he could not hide from the truth. He walked back out onto that stage and said 5 words that shook the building. "I have to apologize." The gasp from the audience was something you could feel in your chest. The crown was physically removed from one woman's head and placed on another. It was the most painful 4 minutes of live television in history. The backlash was nuclear. Steve did not just get mocked, he was hunted. Death threats poured in from Colombia. People were driving past his house in Atlanta, throwing rocks over the gate with notes attached. Empty boxes with pictures of bombs started appearing at his property. He had to hire 24-hour armed security. His first apology tweet made things worse because he misspelt both Colombia and the Philippines. The internet, the very beast that had helped build his fame, turned on him with jagged teeth. He went back to his hotel room that night and sat in the dark. It felt like the Ford Tempo days all over again. The isolation. The feeling that everything he had built was crumbling because of one single mistake. He looked at that card again. The font was tiny, the layout was confusing, but he refused to blame the card publicly. He told reporters, "I own it. I am the man on the mic." But here is the thing most people do not know. Within 48 hours of that mistake, Steve Harvey's name had been Googled 4 billion times. 4 billion. He became the most searched person on the planet. And instead of hiding, he did something remarkable. He made a Super Bowl commercial with T-Mobile mocking himself. He invited Miss Colombia onto his talk show for a tearful, honest reconciliation. He turned the worst night of his career into a masterclass in accountability. And Miss Universe signed him to a multi-year contract to come back and host again. The armor had been cracked, but the man underneath was stronger than anyone knew. And 2 years later, another crack appeared. In 2017, a confidential internal memo Steve had sent to his talk show staff in Chicago was leaked to the press. The tone was harsh. It read, "There will be no meetings in my dressing room, no popping in. Do not approach me while I am in the makeup chair. Do not wait in the hallway to speak to me. I want all the ambushing to stop now." The media went into a frenzy. They painted him as a diva, a tyrant, the man of the people who had forgotten where he came from. He told Entertainment Tonight, "I do not apologize. I just did not want to be in this prison anymore." But the damage to his friendly uncle image was real. But long before the crown and the controversy, Steve Harvey had already survived something far worse than embarrassment. He had survived being invisible. The boy who could not speak. Broderick Stephen Harvey was born on January 17, 1957, in Welch, West Virginia. His parents named him after actor Broderick Crawford from the television series Highway Patrol. Looking back now, that feels like a prophecy nobody saw coming. Welch was a coal mining town where the mountains were steep and the air was thick with dust. The future for most boys in that town was already decided before they could walk. You grew up and you went underground to dig. That was the deal. Steve's father, Jesse Willard Harvey Sr., was one of those men. Jesse Harvey was a coal miner of iron will and very few words. He made $5 a day and spent his life deep underground breathing in the darkness so his family could live in the light. He did not make millions, but he taught Steve the currency of manhood. You show up, you do the work, you do not complain. Steve's mother, Eloise Vera Harvey, was the softness to Jesse's steel. She was a Sunday school teacher who filled the house with gospel music and gratitude. She taught Steve how to pray. That lesson would one day save his life when he had nothing left but a prayer and a car that would not start. But here is the cruel twist in Steve Harvey's origin story. The man who would become famous for his quick wit and lightning-fast comebacks was born with a severe, debilitating stutter. His mind moved at 100 miles an hour. It was filled with jokes and observations and brilliance. But his mouth could not get past the first syllable. Every sentence was a minefield. Simple words like hello or vanilla were mountains he had to climb while other kids watched and laughed. The neighborhood children gave him a nickname, Va 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 Voom. They mocked him when he tried to order at the deli counter. The shame was a heavy coat he wore everywhere he went. But the incident that almost crushed his spirit entirely happened in the 6th grade. His teacher asked the class to write down what they wanted to be when they grew up. Most boys wrote policeman or fireman or farmer, safe dreams, practical dreams. But Steve felt something different. Even locked behind the stutter, he felt a pull toward the television screen. He had watched variety shows on his family's small TV, mesmerized by people who could make an entire room full of strangers laugh. So, with a trembling hand, he wrote 5 words. I want to be on TV. The teacher did not praise his ambition. She made an example of him. She called him to the front of the class and said, "Why would you write something like this? Do you know anyone on television? You are a colored boy from West Virginia who cannot even talk. Who do you think you are?" The class erupted in laughter. It was the kind of laughter that stays with you for 50 years. It was a public execution of a dream. She sent him home with a note telling him to rewrite it with something realistic. But Steve did not rewrite it. He showed it to his father. Jesse Harvey looked at the paper, then at his son's tear-streaked face. He did not laugh. He did not tell him to be a miner. He said, "Put that paper in your drawer, and every morning you wake up, you look at it. Do not let nobody tell you what you cannot be." That paper stayed in the drawer for decades. And years later, after Steve Harvey became one of the most famous faces on American television, he enacted a quiet, beautiful revenge. Every single Christmas, he sent that teacher a brand new television set. He told Oprah, "I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to know that little boy with a stuttering problem was on TV 7 days a week." The teacher eventually told him she had so many TVs, she had to start giving them away. Steve kept sending them until the day she died. Then came another difficult chapter of Steve's life. 3 years in a metal box. The family eventually moved from the coal mines to Cleveland, Ohio. Steve tried college at Kent State University and flunked out after 2 years. He worked at the Ford Motor Company assembly line, putting screws into cars day after day like a robot made of flesh. He was fired. He sold insurance. He sold carpet. He became a mailman. He even tried boxing until a fighter hit him so hard he could not remember his own name. By his mid-20s, Steve Harvey was not a star. He was a drifter with a magnetic personality and zero purpose. Then, on October 8th, 1985, everything changed. A friend dared him to try stand-up comedy. Steve walked into Hilarity's Comedy Club in Cleveland, stepped onto a stage for the first time in his life, and won the $50 amateur night prize. The next morning, in what he would later call a moment of absolute insanity, or perhaps destiny, he quit his job. He had a wife named Marcia, he had twin daughters, he had responsibilities, but he also had a fire in his belly that whispered, "This is it." And almost immediately the world punished him for his arrogance. The comedy gigs were sporadic. The pay was insulting. $50 here, $25 there. His first full year in comedy earned him a total of $3,000. Arguments over money turned into silence at home. Silence turned into separation. His marriage collapsed under the weight of his ambition. Suddenly, Steve Harvey was alone. No wife, no kids, no house. All he had was a small bag of clothes and a 1976 Ford. What followed was 3 years of homelessness that nearly killed him. 1986, 1987, 1988. While the rest of America was watching The Cosby Show and listening to Michael Jackson, Steve Harvey was living inside a metal box. He cleared out the back seat and slept there every night. He bought an igloo cooler and placed it behind the passenger seat. That was his refrigerator, filled with bologna, water, and ice. Hygiene became a military operation. He memorized which gas stations had single-occupancy bathrooms where he could lock the door. He would strip down, wash his body with harsh pink soap from the wall dispenser, shave in the rearview mirror, and pray that nobody would knock on the window. And then he would put on a suit. Because every single night, this homeless man had to walk onto a stage and pretend to be a success. He had to make 200 people laugh until their sides hurt. He had to bathe in their applause for 45 minutes. And then when the show ended and the audience went home to their warm beds, Steve Harvey would walk out the back door, climb into his freezing car, drive to a dark corner of a rest stop, and recline the seat. There was one night that he has talked about more than any other. A gig in Florida. He had driven for hours on fumes, stealing gas because he had literally 0 cents in his pocket. He arrived hungry and desperate. He did the show. He killed. The crowd loved him. Afterward, he went to the promoter to collect his pay. Money he needed to eat. Money he needed to get to the next city. The promoter looked at him and said, "I cannot pay you tonight. Come back next week." Steve stood there in his expensive suit that hung loosely on his thinning frame. He walked out to the car and cried so hard he could not breathe. He said, "God, if you are real, you have got to get me out of this. I cannot do this anymore. I am trying to be somebody. Why is it so hard?" It was the lowest valley of his life. The temptation to quit was sweet and seductive. He could go back to the factory. He could beg for his old job. He could admit the teacher was right. But something stopped him. Maybe it was his father's voice. Maybe it was the paper in the drawer. Or maybe it was the realization that he had already lost so much that he could not afford to stop now. The only way out was through. He kept driving, and one night in late 1989, the phone rang. It was not a bill collector. It was a casting director from a show called Showtime at the Apollo. They were looking for a host. Steve did not have the money for a plane ticket. He borrowed it. He begged for it. And he made it to New York City. He walked onto the Apollo stage, the toughest room in the world, where legends are born and mediocrity gets booed off in seconds. He grabbed the microphone, and for the first time in 3 years, the Ford Tempo felt 1,000,000 miles away. The homeless man was about to walk into the toughest room in the entertainment industry, and if he survived it, the entire trajectory of black comedy in America was about to change forever. The rise of a king. By 1993, he was the permanent host of Showtime at the Apollo, a role he held for 7 years. The car was gone. The bologna sandwiches were a memory. He had a home and a steady paycheck for the first time in his adult life. Then came the WB network sitcom, The Steve Harvey Show, which ran for 6 seasons and 122 episodes from 1996 to 2002. It won 3 consecutive NAACP Image Awards for Outstanding Comedy Series. But Steve wanted more. He looked at the landscape of entertainment and saw something nobody else saw. Rock stars filled arenas, rappers filled stadiums. But comedians still played clubs and theaters. Steve Harvey wanted to change the math. In 1997, he teamed up with D.L. Hewley, Cedric the Entertainer, and Bernie Mac to create the original Kings of Comedy tour. Promoters laughed. They said comedy does not work in basketball arenas. Steve and his partners bet on themselves. The tour grossed over $37 million across 96 performances. It drew nearly 1 million total attendees. When Spike Lee filmed it as a documentary in the year 2000, the movie earned $38 million at the box office on a $3 million budget. Steve Harvey was the glue. He was the host. He was the closer. He wore suits that cost more than the cars he used to sleep in. He held 20,000 people in the palm of his hand every single night. But here is the thing about reaching the mountaintop. The air gets thin up there. And the moment Steve Harvey stopped being the hottest act in comedy, Hollywood was ready to put him in a box and forget about him. The reinvention. Nobody saw coming. By the mid-2000s, Steve Harvey was wealthy and famous. But Hollywood had put him in a box. He was the urban comic, the niche guy. Great for a specific audience, but not a face that could sell soap to housewives in Middle America. The sitcom had ended. The comedy tour had run its course. For most entertainers, this is where the slide into obscurity begins. But Steve Harvey possesses an instinct that separates the rich from the truly wealthy. He knows when the wind is changing. His first pivot was the Steve Harvey Morning Show on radio. It grew to nearly 7 million weekly listeners on over 100 stations, becoming the #1 syndicated morning show in America. Something fascinating happened on that show. When the phone lines lit up, it was not men calling about sports. It was a woman. Thousands of women ask him how men think about love and relationships. A publisher heard these segments and said, "There is a book in this." Steve laughed and said, "I am not an author. I barely passed English." But he sat down, dictated his thoughts, and the result was Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Released in 2009, the book did not just hit the New York Times bestseller list. It stayed there for 64 weeks, with 23 weeks at #1. It sold over 3 million copies in more than 30 languages. 2 blockbuster movie adaptations followed, earning a combined $166 million worldwide. Then came his biggest gamble. In 2010, the producers of Family Feud were desperate. The show was dying. Ratings were dead. It was boring. Steve's agents told him not to do it. Game shows are where careers go to die, they said. Steve saw something they could not. He took the job with one condition: I am going to do it my way. Before Steve, Family Feud was polite. Steve turned it into a stand-up special. When a contestant gave a ridiculous answer, he stopped the show. He roasted them. He stared directly into the camera with an expression of pure disbelief that connected with millions of viewers at home. The ratings did not just improve, they quadrupled. In June 2015, Family Feud surpassed both Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy for the first time in the history of modern television ratings. Steve Harvey had turned a dying show into the #1 program in all of syndicated television. Here is the cruel irony in the life of Steve Harvey. He became the man millions of women turn to for advice on love. But for the first half of his own life, his personal relationships were a disaster. The broken home and the woman who saved him. His first marriage to Marcia Harvey produced 3 beautiful children, twin daughters Brandy and Carly, and son Broderick Jr. But when Steve chose the road and the comedy clubs and the Ford Tempo, he did not just leave a job, he left them. The divorce was finalized in 1994 after years of separation and bitter financial disputes. His son Broderick would later reveal on national television that he did not have his father full-time until he was 16 years old. Then came the second marriage to Mary Shackelford in 1996. This was the union that spanned his rise to superstardom. But as his star rose, the volatility at home exploded. The divorce in 2005 was a public war. It cost Steve approximately $30 million. More than the money, it cost him his peace. He was making 20,000 people laugh every night and then going back to an empty hotel room, wondering why he was so good at understanding crowds, but so terrible at understanding his own heart. But the love story that would ultimately save Steve Harvey sounds like a movie script. In a comedy club in Memphis, Tennessee, around 1990, Steve was on stage. He was still struggling, still unknown. A woman walked in late and sat in the front row. Steve literally stopped the show. He went silent. He looked at her and said into the microphone, "I do not know who you are, but I am going to marry you one day." Her name was Marjorie. They dated briefly, but Steve was spiraling into homelessness and could not bear to reveal it. They lost touch for 15 years. He later explained that a man has to know who he is before he can be of use to a woman. Marjorie would later say, "I wish he had told me what was really going on. I owned my house. He would not have been homeless." Then, in 2005, right after his second divorce, Steve's bodyguard, William Freeman, intervened. He told Steve the only time he had ever seen him truly happy was when he was with Marjorie. The bodyguard tracked her down and handed Steve the phone. Steve heard her voice and said, "How is your husband doing?" She said, "I got divorced 3 years ago." The next morning, Steve got on a private jet and flew straight to Memphis. He got her, and he never let go again. They married on June 25, 2007. Steve adopted Marjorie's 3 children from a previous relationship, including Lori Harvey, making them a blended family of 7 children. It was not easy. Steve told Shannon Sharp that all 4 daughters were initially against the marriage. One of Marjorie's children told Steve to his face, "You are not my daddy." But Steve held firm. He said, "I love this girl. She is the best thing for me. We are going to create an atmosphere of love, and everyone is invited into it." Marjorie transformed him. She told him to cut his pants down, shorten his jacket, stop wearing loud pimp suits, and start dressing like the man God was preparing him to become. The hard edge of the Kings of Comedy era softened. The anger from the divorce years evaporated. Steve Harvey, the man who had spent decades running from poverty and shame, finally stopped running. In 2016, something unexpected happened. Steve Harvey went viral. Not for a joke, not for a mistake. He went viral for a sermon. The jump that changed everything. It happened during a commercial break on Family Feud. The cameras were technically off, but someone was recording. Steve looked at the audience and felt a heaviness in the room. He decided to share the philosophy that had saved his life. He called it the jump. He said, "God has a wonderful life for you, but you cannot have that life unless you jump. If you do not jump, your parachute will never open. You will be safe, you will be cool, but you will never soar." The video was viewed over 51 million times on Facebook alone in the first week. It resonated because it was not a celebrity giving hollow advice. It was a man with scars telling you exactly how he got them. When Steve Harvey talks about the parachute, he is not speaking in metaphors. He is talking about October 8th, 1985. He is talking about the moment he quit the factory and threw himself into the abyss. He is telling you that the parachute did not open right away. He hit the rocks. He got cut. He bled. He starved. But eventually, the wind caught him. Steve once made a promise in a hotel bathroom during his darkest hour. He told God, "If you let me make it, when I get there, I am going to tell everybody it was you." That promise became the engine that powered everything that came after. His mother had planted the seed of faith in him as a boy. She was a Sunday school teacher, and there was no negotiating Sundays in the Harvey household. You went to church. You sang in the choir. You prayed. Steve strayed from that faith during college, but during those 3 years in the car, it was the only thing that kept him alive. He has said repeatedly in interviews that you cannot tell his story without God because it does not make mathematical sense. How does a college dropout with a speech impediment become a global media mogul? How does a homeless man become a centimillionaire? Steve believes his suffering was not punishment. Today, Steve Harvey is worth an estimated $200 million. He earns roughly $45 million a year. He has won 7 Daytime Emmy Awards and 14 NAACP Image Awards. He is a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He launched Family Feud Africa in South Africa and Ghana. He is expanding his brand into the Middle East through a joint venture in Dubai. He wakes up at 3:30 every single morning, and he is still running. But the thing that defines him most is not the money or the fame. It is the Steve Harvey Mentoring Program for young men. Every year, he brings 200 fatherless teenage boys to his ranch in Georgia. He does not give them money. He gives them a blueprint. He tells them about the stutter. He tells them about the teacher who mocked him. He tells them about the soap in the gas station bathrooms, and then he tells them the same thing his father told him. Do not let anybody tell you what you cannot be. His father, Jesse Harvey, died on April 7, 2000 at the age of 85. His mother, Eloise, died on October 8, 1997. Steve was 43 when he lost Jesse and 40 when he lost Eloise. And still, every single day, he honors the promise he made to God in that hotel bathroom during the darkest years of his life. He said, "If you let me make it, when I get there, I am going to tell everybody it was you." He kept that promise, so the next time you see Steve Harvey on your screen laughing that big infectious laugh, remember what it cost him. Remember the silence before the sound. Remember the boy who could not speak, the man who slept in a car for 3 years, the king who read the wrong name on the biggest stage in the world, and the father who finally came home. What is your forward tempo? What is your stutter? And are you brave enough to walk onto the stage anyway? Because the only thing scarier than jumping is standing still. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell us which part of Steve Harvey's story hit you the hardest.